Happy Days, the classic sitcom that made all of us wish we grew up in the 1950s. Where the milkshakes were thick, the drive-ins were hopping, and the Fonz was, well, the Fonz.
What you're about to hear is one of television's greatest betrayals. Happy Days didn't fade out quietly. It was sabotaged. In 1984, after 11 seasons, America was given a goodbye so sincere it felt like family saying farewell. Tom Bosley's final speech closed the door with grace. The story was over, or so everyone thought. Behind the scenes, ABC made a decision that resurrected the show, shattered its ending, and left viewers confused and heartbroken. 5 forgotten episodes crawled out after the finale, turning closure into chaos and rewriting TV history in the worst way possible. How did a perfect ending get destroyed? And why did the network let a classic die twice? The two words that nearly tore Happy Days apart. Ron Howard came dangerously close to walking away from Happy Days, and it wasn't because of money, contracts, or creative differences. By the late 1970s, the actor who had anchored the sitcom since 1974 issued an ultimatum that sent shockwaves through ABC's executive offices. The conflict centered on just 2 words the network wanted to add to the show's title. By its 3rd season, Happy Days had become a cultural juggernaut. Families gathered around their televisions every week. Advertisers competed for airtime, and the cast had transformed into household names. But the character driving the frenzy wasn't Richie Cunningham, the clean-cut, all-American teenager played by Howard. It was Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, Henry Winkler's Fonzie, clad in a leather jacket.
Yes! Oh my gosh, that's an original.
So this is my jacket from the movie Butchie.
And armed with a motorcycle and a signature A. Had exploded into a full-blown phenomenon. Originally introduced as a supporting character, Fonzie quickly became the show's breakout star. Children copied his style, merchandise flew off shelves, and ratings revealed that audiences were hanging on his every appearance. Seeing the momentum, ABC executives proposed what they believed was a logical branding move, renaming the series Fonzie's Happy Days. On paper, it looked like a marketing win. In reality, it threatened to change the very foundation of the show. For Ron Howard, this wasn't a harmless adjustment. It felt like a dismissal of the role he had built from the ground up. Richie Cunningham wasn't just another character. He was the emotional anchor of the series, the lens through which audiences experienced the world of Happy Days. Being pushed aside in the show's identity felt like a betrayal of both his work and the ensemble spirit that made the sitcom succeed. Behind the scenes, tensions quietly escalated. Howard, still in his early 20s, found himself at a crossroads few young actors dared approach. In a tense meeting with creator Gary Marshall and network executives, he drew a hard line. If the title changed, he would leave the show. No negotiations, no compromises. Industry insiders were stunned. Young actors rarely challenged network power, especially over something executives viewed as cosmetic. But Howard understood something ABC didn't. Happy Days wasn't a one-character vehicle. Fonzie's cool factor worked because it was balanced by Richie's sincerity, Marion Cunningham's warmth, and the stability of the family dynamic. The situation took an unexpected turn when Henry Winkler himself sided with Howard. Despite being the proposed centerpiece of the rebrand, Winkler rejected the idea outright. He reminded executives that Fonzie's popularity depended on the ensemble around him. Why change what already works, was the message he made clear. That united front ended the debate. The title remained Happy Days, and the show continued as an ensemble comedy rather than a single-star showcase. But the confrontation left a lasting impression. Howard began reconsidering his future in front of the camera, gradually shifting his focus toward directing, a decision that would eventually lead him to become one of Hollywood's most respected filmmakers. In hindsight, the fight over those 2 words revealed deeper cracks within the network. The same corporate instincts that nearly cost Happy Days its lead actor would later mishandle the show's scheduling and finale, turning what could have been a graceful farewell into one of television's most awkward conclusions. This wasn't just an ego clash. It was a snapshot of the larger tension between creative integrity and corporate profit that defined an era of television. To ABC, Fonzie represented ratings and merchandise. To the cast and creators, he was a character who only worked because of the carefully balanced world built around him. And yet, Ron Howard's ultimatum was only one part of the story. When the applause faded and the leather jacket came off, it wasn't Howard who faced the deepest personal struggle. It was Henry Winkler, the man behind television's coolest icon, quietly carrying a burden no one watching at home could see. What was Fonzie's smile hiding once the cameras stopped rolling? The hidden struggle behind Fonzie's legendary cool. Henry Winkler was nearly broke when he auditioned for Happy Days. In 1973, the man who would soon define American cool arrived in Hollywood with barely enough money to cover a month's rent. He had left New York after years of struggling in theater, where work was inconsistent and paychecks were small. By his own admission, his financial situation was desperate. At that point, he wasn't chasing stardom anymore. He was chasing stability. The irony couldn't have been greater. As Winkler walked into the audition room, he was anxious and uncertain, nothing like the supremely confident character he was about to portray. He read for the role of Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, a leather-jacketed biker originally written as little more than comic relief. Against expectations, he landed the part. That single decision altered not only his life, but the trajectory of television itself. By the third season of Happy Days, America had found a new icon. Fonzie was no longer a supporting character. He was the heartbeat of the show. What began as a role with a few lines per episode exploded into a full-scale cultural phenomenon. Children repeated his "aye" in school hallways. Barbers were asked to recreate his slicked-back hair, and stores struggled to keep Fonzie-themed merchandise on the shelves. Henry Winkler, once a struggling stage actor, suddenly became one of the most recognizable faces in the country. Magazine covers, talk show appearances, and mountains of fan mail followed. Viewers didn't just enjoy the character. Many tuned in specifically to see Fonzie. By 1976, the writers were weaving Fonzie into nearly every storyline, even moving him into the Cunningham household to increase his screen time. In just a few short years, Winkler had gone from anonymity to pop culture immortality, reshaping Happy Days and redefining what television stardom looked like. But the success came with an unseen cost. For more than a decade, Henry Winkler was the Fonz. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the effortless swagger weren't just wardrobe choices. They became inseparable from his public identity. Over time, the line between the actor and the character began to blur. When Happy Days ended in 1984 after 11 seasons, Winkler wasn't prepared for the emotional fallout. He later described the ending as a sting, but the word barely scratched the surface. It felt like losing a family, losing a purpose, and losing the confidence that had come with stepping into Fonzie's boots every day. The real fear wasn't just about landing another role. It was about confronting a far deeper question. Who was Henry Winkler without the Fonz? For years, audiences and casting directors saw only one version of him. Typecasting hit hard, and opportunities dried up. He was deeply grateful for the role that made him famous, yet painfully aware that it might also trap him forever. The anxiety was relentless. Winkler admitted he feared slipping back into the same financial and emotional uncertainty he had known before Happy Days. On the outside, he had achieved everything actors dream of: fame, wealth, and legacy. But inside, the insecurity never left. Hollywood offered little mercy. Fonzie had become an American symbol of cool, and audiences struggled to accept Winkler as anything else. Lawyers, teachers, villains, none of it felt believable to casting directors who only saw the leather jacket. For years, rejection and self-doubt followed him. He loved the character that changed his life, but he quietly worried that his career had peaked the moment the show ended. All the while, the public still saw him as the man who could make jukeboxes play with a snap of his fingers. Yet Henry Winkler didn't fade away. When acting roles slowed in the 1980s, he reinvented himself behind the camera, directing projects like MacGyver and Cop and A Half. Gradually, he rebuilt his acting career with roles that revealed his range, from Scream to Arrested Development. Decades later, his performance on HBO's Barry finally earned him long-overdue industry recognition, including an Emmy win in 2018.
I only have 37 seconds. I wrote this 43 years ago.
Even so, Winkler has been honest about how painful the years after Happy Days truly were. The emotional scars lingered long after the applause faded. Fame gave him everything he had once dreamed of, but it also nearly cost him his sense of self. And just as Winkler was fighting his most personal battle, ABC executives were preparing a decision that would ignite an even larger crisis behind the scenes. What rule did the network dare to break next? How the 1984 Olympics undermined Happy Days' farewell. In February 1984, ABC believed it was standing on the brink of triumph. The network had secured exclusive broadcast rights to the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo.
On every corner of this magnificent city, Olympic fever is in the air.
A global spectacle expected to deliver massive ratings, prestige, and a flood of advertising revenue. What executives didn't realize was that this moment of pride would trigger one of the most infamous scheduling disasters in television history, one that permanently altered how networks handle finales and nearly unraveled the legacy of one of America's most beloved sitcoms. This was the overlooked mistake that turned Happy Days into television's first true zombie series. At first glance, the issue seemed manageable. The Sarajevo Games ran from February 8th to February 19th, 1984, and ABC cleared its primetime schedule for nightly Olympic coverage. Regular programming was temporarily displaced, including Happy Days, which was already deep into its 11th and final season. The problem wasn't just that episodes were delayed. The episodes removed from the schedule were critical chapters meant to lead directly into the show's emotional conclusion. ABC now faced a defining decision: delay the series finale until summer so the story could unfold in order, or air the finale as planned in May and deal with the remaining episodes later. They chose the second option, and in doing so, broke one of television's most sacred rules. On May 8, 1984, Happy Days aired its official series finale, Passages. It was designed to be a warm, definitive goodbye. Joni and Chachi became engaged. Fonzie, the embodiment of American cool, adopted a son. And Mr. Cunningham delivered a heartfelt toast, celebrating family, growth, and the passage of time. For millions of viewers, it was closure. After more than a decade, the curtain finally fell. But the story didn't end there. Once the Olympics were finished, ABC still had several unaired episodes sitting in its vault. Instead of shelving them, the network brought Happy Days back in June and July, weeks after the finale had already aired. To audiences, it felt unnatural, almost unsettling, as if a completed story had been dragged back to life. Fans were confused, critics were stunned, and the legacy of a once-perfect sitcom suddenly felt fractured. To grasp the scale of the mistake, it's important to understand what a series finale represents. A finale isn't just another episode, it's a promise. It provides emotional resolution and gives viewers permission to move on. Once that ending airs, the story is complete. ABC executives treated episodes as interchangeable content blocks. From a business perspective, airing a finale on schedule and following it with leftover episodes seemed harmless. extra content for loyal fans. But storytelling doesn't work that way. You can't reopen a closed narrative without breaking trust. Veteran producers compared the move to adding random scenes after a movie's ending or releasing bonus chapters after the final page of a novel. The damage extended beyond Happy Days. The entire industry took notice. The fallout was immediate and lasting. Networks quietly revised their practices, and by the mid-1980s, contracts began including protections for finales, ensuring that no series ending could be compromised by scheduling conflicts or leftover episodes. From that moment on, a new rule was born, one that still governs television today. When a show ends, let it end. No resurrections, no afterthought episodes, no second curtain calls. Yet even after the Olympic scheduling fiasco, Happy Days faced one last threat. Network executives attempted to block a single moment, one scene they feared would change television forever. What was that moment, and why were they so desperate to stop it? The finale moment, ABC tried to erase. By 1984, Happy Days was no longer just a sitcom. It was a fixture of American life. For 11 seasons, it had offered audiences comfort, nostalgia, and familiarity, becoming one of the longest-running and most beloved shows in television history. But when it came time to say goodbye, creator Gary Marshall wanted to end the series in a way no sitcom ever had before, a choice that nearly caused ABC to shut the finale down entirely. Marshall's plan was deceptively simple and deeply risky. He wanted Howard Cunningham, the moral center and father figure of the series, to look directly into the camera and acknowledge the audience. In television terms, this meant breaking the fourth wall. And in the early 1980s, that was almost taboo. Television relied on illusion. Viewers were meant to believe they were quietly observing another world, not participating in it. Characters weren't supposed to know they were being watched. They certainly weren't supposed to speak to the people sitting at home. To ABC executives, Marshall's idea felt reckless. In meeting after meeting, network officials warned him that the scene could ruin everything. For more than a decade, the Cunningham family had existed as real people in 1950s Milwaukee. Executives feared that having Howard speak directly to the audience would shatter that illusion at the exact moment viewers needed emotional closure the most. To them, it was a dangerous gamble that could cheapen the farewell. But Gary Marshall understood something the executives didn't. Happy Days had long stopped being just a fictional world. It had woven itself into real lives. Families had watched Richie grow up, admired Fonzie's confidence, followed Joni's journey, and learned quiet lessons from Howard and Marion's steady parenting. Viewers didn't just watch the Cunninghams, they grew up alongside them. Marshall believed the audience deserved to be acknowledged. His vision wasn't a gimmick or a stunt, it was a thank you. He wanted Howard Cunningham, not as a character pretending cameras didn't exist, but as a symbolic father figure, to speak directly to the millions of people who had welcomed the show into their homes for 11 years. After weeks of resistance, ABC reluctantly agreed. On May 8, 1984, during the series finale titled Passages, the moment arrived. In a quiet living room scene, Tom Bosley looked straight into the camera and delivered words that stopped audiences cold. He spoke about raising children, about ordinary lives filled with love, and about the joy of watching the next generation carry that love forward. Then he ended with a simple, powerful goodbye, thanking viewers for being part of the family. Instead of confusion, there were tears. Audiences didn't feel pulled out of the story. They felt invited into it. The moment landed exactly as Marshall hoped. Howard Cunningham wasn't breaking the illusion, he was completing it. The relationship between the show and its audience was finally acknowledged out loud. Critics initially dismissed the scene as overly sentimental, but history told a different story. Fans flooded the network with letters praising the ending. Television historians later cited it as one of the most emotionally effective finales ever aired, a rare example of a sitcom honoring its audience without irony or distance. The scene also changed how writers viewed finales. It proved that viewers could accept bold, unconventional storytelling when it was rooted in sincerity. A series finale wasn't just another episode, it was a cultural goodbye, and it deserved to be treated as such. Ironically, the very network that feared this moment would weaken Happy Days would undo its power just weeks later. By airing unaired episodes after the finale, ABC broke the most sacred rule in television storytelling. Once a story ends, you don't bring it back. And so, the farewell that nearly never aired, Howard Cunningham's quiet thank you to America, was almost buried beneath a programming decision so disastrous it would haunt network executives for decades. But even that wasn't the end. Because just weeks after viewers accepted the goodbye, Happy Days was dragged back from the grave. Which forgotten episodes resurrected the show, and why did ABC let it happen? How 5 forgotten episodes destroyed Happy Days' perfect ending. Between June and September of 1984, ABC made a decision that television historians still struggle to explain. What should have stood as one of the most graceful farewells in sitcom history was quietly undone, not by scandal, not by declining quality, but by 5 forgotten episodes that never should have aired. In the process, Happy Days, a show that had survived cast changes, shifting cultural tastes, and more than a decade on the air, was reduced to an industry cautionary tale. By the time the series finale Passages aired on May 8, 1984, Happy Days had already secured its place in American culture. 11 seasons had turned the Cunningham family into more than fictional characters. They were familiar presences in millions of homes, symbols of comfort, stability, and nostalgia for a simpler era. Gary Marshall's finale respected that bond. It didn't rely on shock or spectacle. It relied on gratitude, closure, and emotional honesty. Howard Cunningham's direct address to the audience was a rare act of trust between a show and its viewers. It acknowledged that television wasn't just entertainment. It was shared time, shared memory, and shared growth. For most fans, the goodbye felt final. It felt right. And then ABC reopened the story. What viewers didn't know at the time was that the Winter Olympics earlier that year had displaced several episodes originally scheduled for February. These weren't special installments or carefully designed add-ons. They were ordinary mid-season scripts, unfinished business that should have remained unfinished. Instead of protecting the integrity of the finale, ABC executives treated these episodes as unused inventory. On June 4, 1984, less than a month after the emotional farewell, ABC aired So How Was Your Weekend? There was no announcement, no explanation, no framing. The episode simply appeared in the schedule as if nothing had ended. For casual viewers, it was confusing. For loyal fans, it was unsettling. They had already said goodbye. The episode itself was harmless enough. Light comedy, familiar rhythms, nothing offensive. But context matters in storytelling. Coming after Passages, it felt like emotional whiplash. The Cunninghams were suddenly back, laughing and joking, untouched by the goodbye that audiences had just experienced. The illusion of finality was shattered. Then came low notes, followed by School Dazed. Each episode deepened the damage. Rather than feeling like nostalgic bonuses, they felt like intrusions. Viewers weren't revisiting a beloved show, they were being forced to watch a version of it that no longer fit the emotional reality they'd already accepted. Critics at the time struggled to describe what ABC had done. Some called it careless, others called it cynical, but many settled on one word: disrespectful. Not just to the show, but to the audience. Television is built on trust. Viewers invest years of their lives into characters and stories. When a finale airs, that investment is honored with closure. ABC violated that contract. By August 1984, ABC aired Good News, Bad News. The episode, which centered on Chachi facing medical setbacks after being offered a chance to tour with the Beach Boys, carried more emotional weight than the others. For a brief moment, fans wondered if this would serve as an accidental final chapter. an imperfect but tolerable ending to a story already closed. But the network wasn't finished. On September 24, 1984, ABC aired what would become the final Happy Days episode ever broadcast, Fonzie's Spots. Instead of reflection or dignity, the episode ended the series on a note that stunned longtime fans. Fonzie, once the embodiment of confidence and loyalty, was humiliated in a hazing storyline involving Howard's Leopard Lodge. There was no farewell, no acknowledgement of the journey, no emotional resonance. That episode became the show's final broadcast image. For many fans, this was unforgivable. Television historians later referred to these 5 episodes as the moment Happy Days died twice. The show had already ended beautifully, only to be dragged back and stripped of dignity by corporate indifference. ABC had unintentionally demonstrated the danger of treating storytelling as content management rather than emotional experience. Ironically, this disaster reshaped the industry. Other networks paid attention. Contracts were rewritten. Final protections became standard. Networks learned that once an ending airs, the story is over, no matter how many unused episodes remain. Happy Days didn't collapse because it stayed on too long. It didn't fall apart because audiences stopped caring. It was undone by a network that failed to understand what endings mean. Fans deserved to remember the Cunningham family as Gary Marshall intended, whole, grateful, and at peace. Instead, they were left with confusion, disappointment, and a legacy fractured by 5 episodes that should have stayed buried. That's how one of television's warmest, most beloved sitcoms became a permanent warning to Hollywood. When you say goodbye, you don't take it back. And Happy Days paid the price for learning that lesson first. How the cast moved on after television's most infamous farewell. When the cameras finally stopped rolling in 1984, Happy Days was already secured as one of the most influential sitcoms in American television history. But the mishandled ending left behind more than just confused viewers. It left the cast carrying a complicated legacy. For some, the finale marked a clean break and a new beginning. For others, it became an unresolved chapter that followed them for decades. Ron Howard was already preparing for life beyond Richie Cunningham long before the final episode aired. Having grown restless with acting, he quietly transitioned into directing, a move that would redefine his career. In the years that followed, Howard built one of the most respected resumes in Hollywood, directing films like Apollo 13, Cinderella Man, and the Oscar-winning A Beautiful Mind. The chaos surrounding Happy Days' ending barely touched him. If anything, it confirmed his instinct to pursue creative control behind the camera rather than remain tied to network decisions. Henry Winkler's path was far more complicated. The Fonz made him a worldwide icon, but it also became a creative prison. Casting directors struggled to see beyond the leather jacket and swagger, and as the 1980s wore on, his acting opportunities dwindled. For years, Winkler wrestled with self-doubt and professional frustration, openly admitting that the end of Happy Days felt emotionally unfinished. It wasn't until the 1990s, through unexpected roles in Scream, The Waterboy, and eventually his Emmy-winning performance in Barry, that he fully reclaimed his identity as a versatile actor, rather than a single unforgettable character. Marion Ross, who embodied warmth and stability as Marion Cunningham, quietly reinvented herself. She became a beloved presence across television and film, appearing in shows like Gilmore Girls and lending her voice to animated series such as SpongeBob SquarePants. Yet, no matter how many new roles she took on, fans continued to associate her most deeply with her role on Happy Days, particularly her contribution to the finale. Her participation in the show's emotional goodbye remained one of the most quoted and cherished moments of her career. Tom Bosley transitioned smoothly into a second act, finding renewed success on Murder, She Wrote. Still, for millions of viewers, he would forever be Howard Cunningham, the father who broke television's rules to thank America for being part of his family. When Bosley passed away in 2010, the reaction felt deeply personal to fans, as if the nation had lost not just an actor, but a trusted parental figure. His final monologue endured, even as ABC's scheduling decisions later tried to undo its impact. Erin Moran's story was the most heartbreaking. Forever linked to Joni Cunningham, she struggled with typecasting, financial hardship, and personal turmoil after the show ended. Her spin-off, Joni Loves Chachi, collapsed quickly, and the stability she once had faded. Moran's death in 2017 became a sobering reminder of how unforgiving fame could be, especially for young actors who grew up under television's spotlight without lasting industry support. Scott Baio, who played Chachi, found intermittent success in later sitcoms, but gradually became more prominent for his public political stances than his acting. Despite that, Happy Days remained both his greatest career milestone and the role he could never truly escape. Anson Williams, remembered as Potsy, chose a radically different path. Stepping away from acting, he built a successful career as an entrepreneur and even ventured into politics. His reinvention illustrated how some cast members had to leave Hollywood entirely to escape the long shadow of the show. Don Most, who played Ralph Malph, took a quieter route. He pursued music, occasional acting roles, and fan conventions, maintaining a loyal following without chasing mainstream fame. For many longtime viewers, his presence remained a nostalgic link to the show's lighter, sillier side. For the cast as a whole, the mishandled finale didn't erase the magic of their shared years, but it complicated their goodbye. Fans were left unsure whether to remember the heartfelt farewell of passages or the awkward leftover episodes that followed. That ambiguity lingered for decades, resurfacing in interviews, reunions, and retrospectives. Then came 2024. At the Emmy Awards, marking the 50th anniversary of Happy Days, Ron Howard and Henry Winkler stood together on stage beside a jukebox. When Winkler struck it and the theme song played, the room erupted. Critics called it the ending the show never truly received. For fans, and for the cast, it felt like long overdue closure. The legacy of Happy Days isn't just built on nostalgia, jukeboxes, or catchphrases that still echo decades later. It's about what happened after the laughter faded, when the cast was left to carry the weight of one of television's most infamous endings. Each of them faced that moment differently. Some used it as a launching point, stepping into new creative worlds and redefining their careers. Others struggled beneath the shadow of characters they could never fully escape. Yet, taken together, their journeys tell a larger story, one about resilience, reinvention, and the lasting bond between performers and the audiences who grew up with them. In the end, even a mishandled farewell couldn't erase their impact or diminish the place Happy Days holds in television history. This wasn't just a bad decision, it was a moment that changed television forever. Like the video, subscribe for more untold television stories, and comment below, do you remember the real ending, or the one ABC left behind?